Howdy everypony. This video is going to be a bit shorter as it's like it's like a third of a chapter, but I separated it for a good reason. So here we go. As she trotted through Ponyville, she was fully aware of the look she was getting. Last time she was here, she was made a fool of by Twilight and her friends. She had hoped they had forgotten about her horrible boasting, but as it turns out, some things aren't easily forgotten. This was one of those things. Jeez, she said. I knew it might be bad, but I'd hoped that 2 years. They were both only 19 at the time, but Twilight was clearly more mature than the two of them. The more mature of the two of them. She guessed that came from being a disciple of Princess Celestia. Her caravan was getting heavy, so she guided it to the park, so she could rest on a bench. As she lay down on the bench, she pulled her hat over her face to cover her face as best as she could. Hopefully no pony would bother her. Twilight Sparkle, she thought to herself. Where are you? Did you say Twilight? A southern voice asked. She pushed her hat up slightly and saw Apple Bloom and Silver Spoon sitting in front of her. Silver Spoon was shocked when she saw her face. I know you! You're the great and powerful Trixie! Glad to see I still have fans, Trixie said somberly. You said you were looking for Twilight, right? Apple Bloom said. I know where she lives. Oh, could you take me there? Sure, Apple Bloom said with a nod. Trixie smiled warmly and got up from her bench. So, what brings you to Ponyville? Silver Spoon asked. It's my last stop on my personal journey. I plan on settling down here, but first need to speak to Twilight. Y'all here for revenge, are you? Apple Bloom asked. 'Cause my sister told me about what happened the first time you came to town. You might think that, Trixie said, looking away, but I assure you my presence here isn't a red flag. Well, okay, Apple Bloom said, looking at Trixie seriously. She probably didn't believe— oh, sorry. Well, okay. I'm sorry. Well, okay, Apple Bloom said, looking at Trixie seriously. She probably didn't believe her. Are you planning on doing another show here? Silver Spoon asked, shocking Apple Bloom. I might, Trixie said. Why? 'Cause my friend here has a killer stage and she's just dying to try and make. And you're the first show pony we've seen here, Silver Spoon explained. That can't be coincidence. You know, our meeting here? Silver Spoon, Apple Bloom whispered nervously. I'll tell you what, Trixie said, now focusing on Apple Bloom. If I decide to do a show here, I'll get in touch with you. How's that? Sure, Apple Bloom said with an awkward smile. The rest of the trip was in silence. Apple Bloom kept looking at her suspiciously while her friend, Silver Spoon, was it? Kept jumping up and down in excitement. Clearly she was really happy to see that Trixie needed a stage. After a while, they reached the library. Did she live here? No wonder she was so powerful, Trixie said, looking up at the building. She then turned to her young escorts. Where do you live, Apple Bloom? I live with my brother and sister, Sweet Apple Acres. I believe I know where that is, Trixie said thoughtfully. She bowed to them. The great and powerful Trixie thanks you, she says in her original show voice, smiling when Silver Spoon squealed happily. She spoke in the voice, Silver Spoon said, clearly in fan-filly mode. Apple Bloom just shook her head and rolled her eyes, which made Trixie laugh. If I need further assistance, I'll turn to you, Trixie said. Please do, and thank you, Silver Spoon said, making Apple Bloom sigh. Trixie watched the two fillies trot off and turned to the library. Was she really about to do this? Would she even hear her out? Trixie took a deep breath, then knocked on the door. Coming! A young male voice called out. When the door opened, her eyes met the shocked expression of Twilight's dragon assistant. Wait, aren't you— I'm sorry if I'm intruding, but I must speak to Twilight Sparkle. Is she in? Yeah, she's in, Spike said with a look of Trixie. Spike looked up at Trixie with a sort of suspicion. Was this going to happen with every pony she saw? May I speak to her? Trixie asked after a second. Spike nodded slowly and closed the door. If she didn't hear Twilight's name called soon after, she would have thought he just closed the door on her face. A second later, the door opened again, but this time she was face to face with a purple unicorn. She looked a little different than how she had 2 years ago, but the mane gave her away. It was her, the pony that changed her life forever. and judging from her expression, she wasn't much happier to see her other than every other pony she'd saw. Trixie? Twilight asked. What are you doing here? Good question, Trixie thought. She had dreamt of this day for 2 years, but now she was here and she didn't know what to do. She took a deep breath and spoke again. May I come in? I've been walking around a long time and I'd like to rest my hooves. Sure, Twilight said, moving to the side and ushering Trixie in. Trixie slowly walked into her library and took it all in. You could learn a lot about a person from what's in their house. All Trixie saw were books. Lots and lots of books. There were a few ornaments here and there, but clearly decor wasn't one of Twilight's strong points. Do you want any tea? Twilight asked. A little British there, sorry. Well, it's tea. Has to be British. Shocking Trixie a bit. Oh, yes. Yes, please, Trixie said. Twilight nodded and walked off to where Trixie assumed was her kitchen. Now alone, she sighed and rested on the floor in front of the table. She was finally in the house of the one pony who had bested her. It was scary, and she half expected to be turned away at the door. But maybe this was good. Maybe this was a good idea. I don't like it, Spike said instantly. I know this looks strange, but I want to give her a chance, Twilight said, pouring the tea into 2 cups with her magic. But she gulped away 2 years ago as if nothing had changed. That was 2 years ago, Spike. She may be different now. Besides, she looks like she really wants something. It may be important. Or maybe it's a trick. Remember, she isn't the most honest pony in the world, Spike said. Well, we're about to find out, Twilight said, using her magic to carry the 2 cups. Let's try and be hospitable here. Right now, Trixie is our guest, and we're going to treat her as such. All right, Spike said dejectedly. Twilight walked back in the main room, where she saw Trixie resting. I'm back, Twilight said. Trixie opened her eyes and looked at Twilight with a somewhat sad smile. Was she afraid of something? I hope you don't mind green tea with grinsling and honey. It's the only kind I drink, so... No, I don't mind. Actually, it's my favorite, Trixie said and looked down almost like Fluttershy used to, and Twilight could have sworn she was blushing a bit. Thank you. I'm not really sure with Trixie. Make her Russian, or... I'm just going to stick with Russian and see what happens. Twilight nodded and trotted to the table, setting down the 2 cups of tea. This was met by a few seconds of awkward silence. So, how have you been? Twilight asked. Good, good, Trixie said with a nod. I've been having a personal pilgrimage all over Equestria. Really? What sort of pilgrimage? Well, Trixie looked down again. Yeah, just noises. After what happened 2 years ago, I began learning more and more about magic. After my first year, I began using my magic to help ponies. She took a sip from her tea before continuing. I actually did save a village from Ursa Minor. For real this time. I see, Twilight said, actually tempted to believe her since she mentioned an Ursa Minor, not a major like before. I looked up Ursa Majors. Celestia, I can't believe what I was saying. Trixie laughed a bit. Yeah, Twilight laughed as well. They're no joke. There was more silence, broken by an unusual statement. I have to thank you for that, Trixie said, shocking Twilight. Thank me? For what? Well, that day I realized I didn't really know what magic was, Trixie said. All I knew was smoke and mirrors. What you showed me, at the time I wouldn't admit it, but it mesmerized me. For the longest time I just wanted to see you again. Oh, wow. Twilight was really taken aback hearing this. It sounded like Trixie felt very strongly about what happened that day. Twilight didn't think she'd made that much of an impression on her. So you came all this way to thank me? Well, that was part of it, Trixie said. But actually, I was hoping I could complete my training here. Huh? Twilight was wide eyes after hearing this. Trixie then took Twilight's foreleg earnestly. Please, Twilight, make me your disciple, she said. You want me to? Twilight asked, now shocked beyond belief. You know how to do things no pony could imagine. You're literally the strongest pony in Equestria besides Celestia herself. I highly doubt Twilight. I've been all over Equestria. I know unicorns, pegasi, earth ponies, all with different powers, but none of them have an ounce of your power. I'm really not very consistent with Trixie. I'm sorry. Really? Twilight asked, her heart racing now. If I'm willing to admit it, you better believe it. Twilight Sparkle, I know literally everything there is to know about magic now. At least, normal magic. You're the only pony who can teach me the magic I want to. No, need to know. At this point there were tears in her eyes. Let me learn under you. I beg you. Trixie really wants this. She was literally crying now. Twilight wanted to help her, but there was something bothering her. Trixie had called her the strongest pony in Equestria. That couldn't be true, though. Surely someone had to be stronger. Some pony had to be stronger. No one stronger? Twilight said, her voice shaking now. No one, Twilight. There isn't a pony alive besides a princess who could defeat you, and even they might have trouble. I'll never be lucky enough to top by Princess Celestia herself, but I can at least reach out to her disciple and ask her to make me hers. Trixie, I'm not qualified. You're more qualified now. We're not fillies anymore, Twilight. That was 2 years ago. I'm sure by now even the princess recognizes your talent. She did just turn 21. She was technically qualified to teach some pony else. Maybe this is a sign. Maybe she was supposed to do this. She'd be the perfect disciple. Blind obedience is the best obedience. She'll follow you to the ends of the earth. No! Twilight shouted suddenly. She ran to the couch and fell down, burying her face in a pillow. Twilight, did I upset you? Trixie asked. No, I'm just... Twilight swallowed and turned her head back to Trixie. I need some time to think about this. I understand, Trixie said. She looked away, but then suddenly looked as she had gotten an epiphany. Give me a few days. I'm going to put on another show, and I want you to attend. A show? Yes, when you see what I can do, you'll make me your student. She turned and walked out of the door. You'll see, Twilight, I have potential. When she left, Twilight rested her head on the pillow, but a second later actually broke down into tears. Spike came and ran over to her, began rubbing her back. Twilight, he said softly, what are you so afraid of? She wanted to answer him, but she couldn't. Instead, she wrapped her forelegs around him in a loving embrace and continued to sob. He was right, though. She was afraid. Afraid of a voice in her head, of a demon that might be waiting in her dreams. Afraid of thoughts running through her head and of learning the truth. The truth that she was the strongest pony of all in Equestria. A truth that for a split second she sort of liked. Alright, so it turns out that was actually longer than the previous episode, which is pretty cool. Overall, I'm pretty enthused with how this is going on. Next chapter is chapter 5. I'm still gonna do that tonight, hopefully. Actually, as I speak, I have successfully